Oh, wait a minute.
What?
Part of the problem maybe that looks like the stream accidentally started for 11, scheduled for 11. Hey, everybody, welcome back. It's Sunday, and scheduling was off on this, so the YouTube says 10, but the StreamYard says 11. So, welcome back. Looks like we do have 4 folks watching, so whoever you are, sound off. I have with me Bear, the Gen X GM. He's come on to talk to me about basically nothing today. I find it amusing that I have the Star Trek Cup and he has the D&D Cup, but I'm much more the D&D player than he is, and he's a Star Trek guy, so we're supporting each other's.
I could go get my IDIC mug if you'd like. I mean, make it all wonderful. But I am wearing my Mighty Turtle T-shirt.
Your Mighty Turtle T-shirt, huh?
Yeah.
Is that your character, your power armored character?
Yep, that's part of the Zenith universe, the Mighty Turtle, and you can get this shirt at our spring store. So, hey.
Nice. I may have to grab that one. I'm a sucker for power armored characters. One of my favorite Champions villains was Ankylosaur.
Oh yeah.
Way back to the old Thin Champions books back in the day. We used to pick those up and just use them in our games because they were such detailed profiles and they had really good backgrounds and stuff.
Oh yeah.
So it looks like we got Seraphis and we got IQ, we got Nosorian. Good morning, everybody. Oh, but yeah, actually the Champions villains books were always excellent.
Classic villains was fantastic.
Or enemies, I guess. They always called them enemies.
That's right, classic enemies, right? Classic enemies was fantastic. I actually, unlike a lot of people, I like Clown. I didn't mind Clown at all, and a lot of people hate Clown, but I like Clown.
And I mean, and then there's Foxbat. Foxbat is a classic.
Foxbat is tiresome. I was a big fan of Serve and Protect was a great adventure with some great NPCs in the back.
I never got a hold of any of the old adventures.
Oh yeah, and then of course Aaron Alston's Strike Force was one of the best books ever made for Champions.
I did. So the early exposure to Champions was, like I said, we just picked them up off the shelves, not with any interest in Champions. It was just more, hey, I'm going to play these are villains that I can use, and that's like where I first discovered, was it Dr. Destroyer or whatever his name is. I did later on, I think for like the 4th or 5th edition of Champions, I did pick up, hey, Sergeant Mushroom, aka Jim. I did pick up the Viper source book for like 4th or 5th edition.
Yeah.
I've got a soft spot for superhero universe organizations. So I never.
The Zenith universe may have a few. Yes.
Well, in Marvel, one of the first things I ever created for the old Marvel Superheroes game was the Legion of Anti-Mutants, also known as LOAM. And it was like very, very cheesy, like super basic. It was, I showed you some of those illustrations of the super Nazis I did. It was that kind of, all of them were illustrated that way, where we just traced over the pictures from the rule books and stuff like that.
Okay.
But they were a weird organization in that they were outwardly an anti-mutant group, but they actually used mutants in their organization.
Oh,
and
of course.
They were really more of a mutant exploitation group. And the hidden leader of that organization was a character named Hellbeast, who was a basically superpowered drug dealer. So the whole LOAM was really just a front for this massive drug cartel because it was the 80s, So, but it ended up playing out really well. And LOAM would go on for like a decade of play, coming back, getting reiterated. Like when the Iron Age comics came out, LOAM got a really hardcore Iron Age reboot,
The 80s, powered by greed, fueled by Coke.
Pretty much. It's actually a funny anecdote. I was about the 80s. One of my YouTube shows that I watch, YouTube channels I watch, is a channel called Pasta Grammar. It's an Italian cooking show where the hosts are a American-born dude who married this very traditional Italian lady who's from a long family of food in Italy, and they did an episode of this today on the trash recipes that hit Italy in the 80s. I'm like, oh, so the 80s weren't just trashy for America because they're like risotto made with strawberries and champagne, and, and and then like it's like all this like the same type of trash recipes that you would like kitschy you know yuppie party recipes that also hit over here, and I'm like, oh well, I'm glad to see that was kind of universal. It wasn't just us. Very good. Money's is here. Doc Flamingo, thank you. Doc Flamingo sounds like a real like a villain in a comic, like one of those tongue in cheek.
Like the Tick. It sounds like someone the Tick would fight.
I am Doc Flamingo.
Hello, I am Dr. Flamingo. I will dance the flamenco.
Mild-mannered ornithologist by day.
Yeah. Dr. Flamingo, a mild-mannered proctologist by day, living in South Florida.
Now I'm just like, he's got this super like flamboyant costume, but he's got like this really heavy like New York Jewish accent.
That'd be fucking hilarious.
Hello, I am Dr. Flamingo.
I'm Dr. Flamingo. I'm here. I'm gonna listen. Look, Tick. I understand. After we're done the fight, come see me in the morning. I'll take a look. Make sure everything's all right for you. You wouldn't kick the Tick's ass, Dr. Flamingo. You'd check it for prostate problems.
IQ, your friend could flip the goddamn table over those recipes, but those are Italian recipes that came out of Italy.
Yeah, but Italians will flip the table over anything. It's the
You think that fandom in other areas is like really toxic? Try going on to any Italian cooking community. How dare you deviate from the prescribed pasta realm? Like, there's a serious like OSR Italian,
Oh my god!
No. But anyways, no, that's just a funny anecdote. But anyways, so that actually came up with a thought while I was getting coffee, on sweet spots for games. Might be an interesting one. Like for example, in the spectrum of open in general to very specific flavored games, what is your sweet spot? Like, I've talked in the past, like Blade Runner is too restrictive of an RPG for my tastes, whereas something like Cyberpunk I prefer because it allows me to play any of those cyberpunk-y type things. But for me, like Cyberpunk, for example, is in that sweet spot because it's got enough character and flavor to really make it something.
Yeah. Instead
of being like super uber general with no flavor in just a general style.
Okay. I am hit or miss on licensed property games, right? And that'll usually depend on how open the game is, or
I'm not even specifically asking about
license. No, hang on. This is leading somewhere. Or how interesting the setting is. Cyberpunk works because it gives you a setting, but you can really just do what you want. And you don't have to worry about it, right? You can ignore their stuff and do what you want, which is a really nice thing. Blade Runner is a very specific game designed around fucking blade running. And it's the weirdest game. When I heard it was like you play 6, I was like, no. So for me, a sweet spot in the game is versatility. If the game is versatile and I can use it for other things, like Marvel superheroes, for years we used it, didn't touch Marvel, we used our own universe, right? That's the way it was, which has led to the Zenith universe. But the more versatile your game is, I don't care about the setting, but I don't like generic games. I prefer games that give me an implied setting anyway, that I can alter or change as see fit, but at least feels like the game was designed for a purpose.
Yeah, that's why I never get purpose. Exactly. It comes out the door with like, here's the generic game, and then here's a bunch of setting books. The problem is your setting books are then plugged into your generic system, and you never really get the, whereas like Star Wars is set as a setting is wide enough to do anything you want with, but the rules are very much written to support Star Wars, right?
Yeah. And led to a great D6 system that could be ported into anything.
Yeah.
Which is really the beautiful part of it. Sometimes I don't like the setting, but I like the system. Like, I like Chaos Team's basic role-playing system, but I fucking hate RuneQuest. Glorantha? Ugh.
I'm super happy to see that they finally updated Dark Ages to the 7th edition rules. You know why I didn't know that they did that? Because the dumbasses, and I'm going to point fingers, yes, they used the same cover that they did for the 6th edition one.
But this time it says setting guide.
Well, I know, but they didn't.
There's a reason why. They are dumbasses. I agree they're dumbasses, but the reason why is because the 2nd edition, very limited release, only at Gen Con.
Yeah, it was the Gen Con 2015.
And then the pandemic hit, and then they were like, well, we've got no more we can send out, and we'll just rewrite the damn thing during the pandemic instead.
Well, they snuck the rewrite out, though, because there was, for the longest time, they're like, no, we're not going to do it. We're not, there's maybe some license tie-in or some sort of ownership thing where the BRP, is tied to 6th edition and we can't update it and all of that. But I'm happy to see that they did it because 7th edition Call of Cthulhu is the best edition of Call of Cthulhu is in terms of the mechanics.
It's the best edition of the basic role-playing game, period.
Yeah. And so the fact that Dark Ages, the original Dark Ages was, even though it was a Cthulhu game, it was mostly BRP with Cthulhu laid onto it. The fact that they updated that to 7th edition now means that I can use Call of Cthulhu 7th edition Dark Ages to do my dark fantasy game that I want to run.
Which I'm doing.
Because I figured... So D&D, for just kind of completely tangent here based on that. One of the problems with D&D and dark fantasy is you never have that vulnerability in D&D. You may, in old school, at low levels, have that vulnerability, but it's hard to project that in D&D because there's still the basic conceit that you are out there to kick down doors, kill things, and take their stuff, regardless, right? Even if the DMs, no matter how much the DM says, this is a dark and gritty setting where you couldn't die and the monsters are blah, blah, blah. You have to do a lot with D&D to change that paradigm.
Yeah.
Being able to just come out the door and say, we're using Cthulhu Dark Ages, and you can even put it in a fantasy world. Like I have Estval, which is this dark fantasy setting. It's an Eastern European on the border of Dark Age Turkey, kind of Near East kind of a setting. And Estval is what I created for my dark fantasy setting. Very Witcher inspired, very Slavic folklore. But there's nothing in, like you're saying, you can ditch the setting. And that's kind of where this came from. You're saying, if the system is cool, but you don't like the setting, I don't necessarily want to run Call of Cthulhu for a Dark Ages for Estval. I want to run a dark fantasy game for Estval. But now that the tools are there, I can easily write up my spooky, creepy elves that are not designed for player races and are supposed to be out there in the corners of the woods. When you're in the edge of your vision when you're not looking, is that somebody behind the tree? Yes, it's an elf, and you don't want to get caught by them after dark. Kind of thing. But it's nice that they did it to 7th edition because I hate the resistance table in previous editions of BRP.
Yeah,
that resistance table slows everything down so damn much.
Which is why 7th edition Call of Cthulhu got rid of it. And as a result of that, they made the game so much better. And I was heartbroken when they re-released their update of the basic role-playing game core book, and they didn't even include adaptation rules for switching over to that system.
So does the 7th edition, I haven't had a chance to digest 7th edition Call of Cthulhu Dark Ages, does it still use like the more detailed armor system of BRP?
No, never did.
It never did. So because BRP, one of the things that makes it handy for fantasy, for like fantasy sword and medieval games, is that more robust armor system. Because Call of Cthulhu kind of hand waves it.
Yeah.
So the 7th edition Dark Ages also hand waves it.
You just have an armor that does.
Yeah.
They don't do the intense RuneQuest hit location, hit points by hit location system or anything like that.
Yeah, well, the hit location thing I think is useful if you're running a grittier setting because not all because historically armor types didn't cover all areas equally. So it's okay to do that. I also think that there's a balance factor. Like if you're playing a kind of a Dark Ages Call of Cthulhu thing where fights aren't going to happen all the time, and they're usually going to be on a smaller scale, you can allow for a little bit more detail in the combat because it's not going to bog the game down. Your players should still be avoiding combat like they would with regular Call of Cthulhu because it's deadly. Because I've seen more people injured in Call of Cthulhu games from cultists with knives and pistols than I have from monsters. The players are always like, it's a human, I'll just take him on. I'm like, yes, but that human still has a stabby thing or a shooty thing. He may not be a monster who's going to bore a tentacle through your brain, but he's still got the chops to do damage to you. I mean, one of the players in my game got sent to the hospital for a serious part of the game after a cultist stabbed a knife into his chest. It's like he was down to like two hit points left.
I'm hit or miss on the individual hit location thing. Sometimes I'm in love with it, and other times I hate it, and I honestly cannot make up my mind.
Yeah, it's. I think it comes down to the style of game you want to play. I would never want hit locations, and this is why I cringe. There's been 100 articles, in Dragon and throughout the history of D&D on how to make D&D combat more realistic. No, there's too much combat in D&D to try to make it more realistic. The abstraction of combat in D&D is there for a reason because the amount of fighting you are generally going to do in typical D&D. But in something like Call of Cthulhu Dark Ages or even, RuneQuest being a skill-based game tends to give you tools to solve things, and a lot of the adventures are written to where you can solve things with your magic or your skills as opposed to just fighting your way through all the time. That's okay then to have a little bit more detail because you're not going to be spending 8 hours of your 8-hour game session to finish one combat because you're fighting 32 fucking goblins.
Oh, that's fair. But for me, it can bog down sometimes. Like, if you're going to have a system where you're going to use individual hit locations, you need to have a system like Cyberpunk's Interlock system where a shot in the head is going to kill you. I don't care how fucking strong you are.
Yeah.
That bullet to the skull ends your character's existence. So if you have a hit location that takes into consideration a headshot or something they can call vitals, which could be the throat, could be the groin, could be an organ, whatever the case may be, that forces that death save, then I'm okay with it. But if it's just whittling down various parts of their body like the Black Knight in the Holy Grail, not interesting.
Well, one thing I do remember from the Chaosium system, when it comes down to the individual hit points, individual hit locations, the hit point count on individual locations is pretty slim in some cases. Like the head only has like a handful of hit points.
Yeah.
And usually a helmet, might save you, but if you're unprotected and you get hit by anything on the head, you're doomed. If you're using hit location. And my only experience playing with the older version of the Chaosium system, was with the ElfQuest RPG.
I never read that. I remember seeing it. I never read it.
So, interesting history on that. When Chaosium got the license to do ElfQuest, it was right when BRP was being rolled out.
Okay.
And the people at Chaosium are like, BRP is the wrong system for this game. BRP is the wrong system for this game. ElfQuest is about role playing and character. They were like, we should be using something more like Pendragon or something like that, right? Yeah. For ElfQuest, because ElfQuest is very story heavy, very character heavy, if you're familiar with the comic, you know, it was like way ahead of its time in dealing with like just having deep characters. But Chaosium's like, nope, got to use BRP. Got to use BRP. The leadership at Chaosium has pulled some pretty interesting moves. Like Call of Cthulhu, originally, Sandy Peterson wanted to write it in the modern age when he wrote it.
Really?
Yeah, it's Mike Mason and Sandy Peterson were the two co-authors of the original Call of Cthulhu. But Chaosium's like, nope, we have to keep it consistent with the RPG, with the literature. And if you listen to Sandy Peterson talk, almost all of his personal games have been played modern age. That's why when he came out with the Peterson's Nightmares book, it's all modern scenarios, including one that takes place on the space station.
Huh.
Yeah, so yeah, Chaosium has pulled some pretty heavy-handed moves in the past. Like they wanted to fit, they had this system, you know, their BRP system, and anything that came in-house, they pretty much, because if you remember, Stormbringer used BRP. Although I have to say with Stormbringer probably is a better fit because Stormbringer's
First Edition was the shit, and we played the fuck out of it in high school.
the only version of
And Magic World is that with all the fucking Elric removed. So if you want to play that amazing system, that one of the best iterations pre 7th edition Call of Cthulhu of BRP, pick up Magic World.
Yeah, I had the hardbound one that was put out, I think, by GW, Wooden Games Workshop, and it was still the BRP system, but I sold it off with a bunch of my stuff back in the day. Let's see, what do we got here? We'll look at some of the comments here.
We got peoples.
Yeah, Call of Cthulhu is somewhat unique in that it assumes you're going to fail in the end. It's baked in the atmosphere one, really. I would say the atmosphere works for kind of modern day dark fantasy. If you're going for like a Souls-like kind of universe or something like that, which is of course inspired by Lovecraftian cosmic horror. Anything where your horror is dark and dangerous, and humanity does not have the upper hand and only exists on this world thing, but due to the basically either disinterest or goodwill of other beings, I think Call of Cthulhu would fit. You know, in any of the settings where, like, yes, we're in the wilderness, but we're only here because the fairies let us be here. Otherwise, we have no choice.
I think Call of Cthulhu gets a bad rap. I've even given it like the best you can hope for is that you go insane. You know, that's winning at Call of Cthulhu. But I think the system itself transcends the setting, and specifically, there's a game out there called Gore, Gore, which is a generic hack of the BRP system. And he put a supplement out called Stress. Replace sanity with stress, and here's how stress works. And it's fucking excellent.
Yeah, and you can modify the sanity rules too, because like even Dark Ages does that. They're like, with the medieval mindset, just having
freaked out by a monster, they're gonna be like, yeah, no, that exists. So I've been
exactly that. Like, oh look, there's a dead person in the room. Such is life.
Yes. Yes, we've got 3 in the back. We're waiting for spring so we can dig the earth and put them in.
Car full of them going around town. They woke me up with that damn bell.
But I like the stress idea instead of it being it's man, I'm fighting. I took wounds. I'm dealing a thing. I failed at this, and the stress adds up, and then your character has a stress snap.
Yeah, I like the stress rules in the Alien RPG.
Yeah,
the stress and panic rules. I also like the fact that if you panic, it can overflow to other characters. It can create you panicking causes stress in other people, which can then cascade for them going into a panic. And then you get those scenes in the movies where everybody's like, ah!
Exactly.
Because I think that's important to a game like, you know, a high stress type of a setting like Alien or Call of Cthulhu, where you're tense and you kind of have that ticking, that doom clock. In conventional Call of Cthulhu, it's like, well, my sanity's wearing down. I'm eventually going to go ahead and just go whoop, whoop, whoop. Or, you know, I had a temporary bout of insanity and now I'm dysfunctional for a bit. I think the stress
therapy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but I think the stress mechanic might be a cool replacement if you want to keep the game going and not have characters check out because they went Looney Tunes.
Exactly.
They're eventually going to freak out, but
eventually they'll freak out. But I think it's a really nice way to just sort of like give them something that's recoverable as well.
Yeah,
you can reduce your stress and things like that, because I think the sanity can be, and setting wise, accurately brutal.
Yeah,
but I think if you're going to use the system for other things, you can replace sanity with stress and get the same results, the same effects, and actually get more access to stress from events that normally wouldn't affect sanity.
I think the problem with sanity in Call of Cthulhu, I like the sanity mechanic in terms of the setting.
Yes.
The problem is that it is used universally for anything, and I don't feel like, even realistically speaking, or even literarily speaking, if we're going to go back to the source material, finding a dead body is not the same sort of shock to your system as seeing a fucking deep one. Dead bodies we know exist. We've been to funerals. If you're in the 20s, you've probably stumbled on one in the street, in an alley at some point. If you're an urban dweller, if you're in the country, you've seen a tractor accident. You've seen slaughtered animals. Which, while they're not the same thing, they do build up that familiarity. So I don't feel like it necessarily is and now granted, they'll say like, well, finding a dead body is like D3, and that's great, but at the same time, I don't think it's going to be mind shattering. Me finding a dead body should not drive me to insanity. Me finding 32 dead bodies in a row, maybe, but eventually
finding a mass grave, maybe,
But even real world, we know that doesn't usually send us into fits of mania or phobia.
Let me give you an example. We know in the real world gunshots happen.
Yeah.
When I used to work security, we had an incident happen at our site. It was the night I was off. There was a shooting, and one of the guards almost got hit by a bullet. Okay. He was now useless, and eventually we had to take him off site because he was so fucked up by almost getting hit by a bullet that he wouldn't patrol certain areas. He'd call for backup to go into any situation where he felt any remote level of stress. So individuals are going to react differently. I've dealt with dead bodies. They're fucking gross and freaky, and if you think about it for too long, you go,
Yeah, I mean, even I've found one working security. Everybody I know who works security has found a dead body.
Finds a dead body. It's just part of the job. But, especially in the Pacific Northwest. But normies in that situation freak the fuck out when they see a dead body. You know what I mean? Like, they lose their shit. So I think it's all individual. And that's why I think you're right. But to make a system that could accommodate you being able to handle a dead body, but Steve not being able to handle a dead body would be too intricate. So
and that's why I think it's important to use the careers properly in Call of Cthulhu, because they do simulate that through some of the careers. Doctors, for example, people with the doctor career in Call of Cthulhu don't take sanity loss from conventional gore.
Mm-hmm.
If you have the veteran package, the soldier package, you don't take sanity loss from human death and human violence and stuff like that, because it's considered that you've seen that already. You're kind of inured to that. And we've played with that. Like my wife's character, her character, while she wasn't a soldier in World War I, she was a volunteer nurse. And so you know how bad her life was during World War I. She was over in Europe in the behind the lines. She had volunteered. She was from a rich family, but she did her duty and went overseas. And now she's a traumatized, heiress of the family, and now works as a psychic.
But that's the okay. So I can't remember what story I read. This was years and years ago. I was reading this book about guys talking about their experiences in war, and there was this one story this guy told about his sergeant who was this tough as nails SOB. Nothing ever got to him, picking up people's brains and putting them in bags didn't bother this guy. It was just the way it was. And then he came across in this French village a pile of dead dogs that the Germans had killed because they were making too much noise and alerting the snipers where the snipers were. And apparently this sergeant just fucking snapped and went whole hog on a murder spree towards the Germans, killing everybody with an accent. You know what I mean? So I think it's going to, and it's been 30 years since I read this fucking book, but you know what I mean? So I think it's an individual thing, right? I think it's very much an individual thing. I have no problem seeing it. Sorry?
Which is the problem with any kind of mechanical system.
And that's the problem with role-playing games. And this is one of the big problems we have as gamers. Gamers love to fucking fiddle in the weeds of individuality when they make their arguments about stuff that they want to make, failing to understand games must address the larger whole, which is why I think game systems that have advantages and disadvantages or quirks and hitches or boons and banes or whatever the fuck you want to call them are the great equalizer in that case, where you can take those kinds of things and say, okay, I'm playing Call of Cthulhu, but we've got, boons and banes as an additional part of the system. Great. I have the boon, no gore. My character, gore of any type does not affect him at all. Okay, well, I've got the bane animal friend. I hate seeing violence towards animal, and it causes me extra sanity loss. Whatever the case may be, and that's where you can really get into it. So I know a lot of guys like to say they're not into the term building characters. They hate that and all that. I fucking love building characters.
Oh, so do I. I mean, I love perks and flaws. I love perks and flaws. I think as a good GM,
Lighter surface. As a good GM,
you don't have to have a system that has that built in to work with that. I mean, you can look at your character as a GM. You can look at the character's backgrounds and say, well, you know what? Your character grew up on a farm. I'm not going to have you take sanity from this check, even though it says in the module or under the rules, you should take even a minimal amount of sanity. You've slaughtered pigs. You've heard the squealing. You've watched the blood. When you come into this
headless chicken,
when you come into this farmyard and all the animals are mutilated by whatever mutilated them, I'm not going to have you freak out. I am unbothered by animal death, just generic animal death, because I grew up on a farm. I walked out into my back pasture one morning and found 3 of our ewes absolutely just spread across the back pasture. Something had got them, bit holes in their backs, and pulled their innards out through their spines. And it was that I buried a horse that's been out in the sun for 2 weeks. Yeah, you want that? How you bury that horse? You dig a hole next to it and you hose it into the hole. I mean, there was no amount of Vicks on my upper lip and no bandana thick enough to keep me from smelling that thing. So
you and I both have that shared experience of having to do the arm inside to turn.
Yep, I've had an arm up a goat to try and turn a kid.
I got to do it in a horse. At least it was bigger.
Yeah, I've and not to be too gross, but I've had to deal with the animal who's got an abscess.
But that's the thing. Your background should tie into it, and you're right. A good GM can do that.
And that's where I'm going.
Yeah, but I think most people don't either have that knowledge or have that experience to be able to make good calls on it, so having a good merit and flaw system can really help you out.
Yeah, well, the nice thing behind the merit and flaw system is that it removes the burden from the GM. Because, and then by burden, I mean there's always this weird line as a GM that you walk when you're dealing with players that your judgment calls can sometimes skew in favor of the player who does the work. Like, if you have 3 of your players show up and they've got a character, not really much thought put into it. Oh, what were you? I was a book salesman, and I don't have any background that really ties me into the mythos or whatever. Just to go back to Call of Cthulhu, and then you have that one player who's like, I grew up on a farm, and one day I came out, and all the animals in the yard had been frozen solid on an August afternoon. And you're like, okay, you, sir. But as the GM, when you give that player the spiff because he did the work, there's always that weird thing where the rest of the players might see a certain inequity, it's their own damn fault. But the perks flaws system puts it on their sheet. And really, at that point, it makes it inarguable. Yeah, well, this guy has
let's establish something as a truism. I don't like the OSR mentality. It ain't on the sheet; it's in your head. I can't stand that. I can't stand that attitude. I think this is not a fucking contest to prove I'm not here to prove what a man I am. This isn't survival training. Fuck off. If it's on the sheet and it's quantified, it will give the player options and choices. Yeah, but then that's all they're going to work about. Okay, well, that's players, buddy. It's nothing
different that way no matter what.
Exactly. So having it there as a qualifier helps. Now, I love what you said about finding the frozen sheep. I think that's in an August day. I would force a sanity check on the farmer. It ain't right.
I'm saying that was in his background. If that was in his background,
right, beautiful, in his background. So beautiful. So he might encounter weird shit, and it might cause him stress now because I remember that day in August, and now he's triggering an old memory, and I would fucking play that up for sure.
Exactly.
But having a set of merits and flaws in a game that provide certain benefits and detriments to a character's behavior, ability, or play is awesome, and it reduces stupid arguing at a table and pointless. Well, I don't see it that way. Well, I disagree. No, it's clearly written in the rules. This is how it is. Fuck you. That's what happens. You know what I mean?
But yeah, and I know from experience, not that. So one of the advantages of playing in person is you can look through the windows of people's souls, their eyes, their expressions, and see how they're reacting to calls at the table. And even though they may not say anything, you can kind of see the "what the fuck" kind of expression up here. And there have been times where I've been like, "All right, no, I'm going to either we're going to either increase the effect of this or decrease the effect of that." And you can look around the table, and there's a couple of people who are like doubting your call. Nobody says anything because that's just good table etiquette, and the GM should be. But you can read that. But the nice thing about having on the chart having a game system that supports that is that then it again takes the burden off you as the GM. And you can really just hedge on the system. I don't think you should hedge on the system too much because as a GM, you should always feel the ability to go outside of that.
Like everything, moderation is the key.
Yeah.
Right. So if you go champions level, no, that's too much. But World of Darkness, the merits and flaws from World of Darkness, or the whatever they were called, those were simple. They were basic, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Eden Studios game. It's got a minimal list. It's not overpowering. It doesn't. But when you get into games where they start plumbing it to create effect and get benefit out of it, sorry, GURPS, yeah. That's when it goes too far for me. That's too much. That's what Cal's talking about, where the player can become overwhelmed by the choices on their page. Yeah. If they're looking at their character sheet and they go, okay, hang on, he hit me. Wait, I have hard to kill, which means I get to reduce 2 points of incoming damage. Okay.
Yeah, it's like that weird meme where Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire is just George R.R. Martin's GURPS game because he's famous for being a GURPS player. Because if you look at every character in that series, they're always like really amped up in stats somewhere, but then they have some like super crippling flaw that would have given them extra bonus points. Like Tyrion, lore master, super charismatic dwarf.
Yeah.
Unpopular son. Jaime Lannister, master swordsman, charismatic, attractive, incestual relationship with sister.
Bad reputation, exactly.
Every character is like that. Jon Snow, predestined, blah, blah, blah.
Bastard.
But the only thing, I am not trying to judge you here in Intellectual Quandary IQ. I would say that there's a difference real world-wise between sanity loss
and trauma.
Yeah. And that's what the sanity system doesn't separate out. Is the problem with the sanity system is it always leads to Daffy Duck Looney Tunes bounced off the wall. No matter what. It's going to lead to that phobia or a mania or, temporary blindness or being a mute or, delusions or whatever, it's always going to lead there. Trauma generally doesn't do that. it can in severe states. Trauma can lead to insanity, but it is different. Um, most of Gen X's toughness comes from trauma.
Yeah.
Unresolved trauma.
Unresolved.
It's like my wife is on Gen X TikTok, and so she's always sharing these Gen X videos. I'm like, they're like, why is Gen X so tough and blah blah. Well, we did this, that, and the other thing, and I'm like, yes, and we also, one of the primary communications between us and our parents was the back of a hand. And there's a certain trauma just that we don't realize comes from just the neglect we got. We thought it was cool and it made us independent, but at the same time, as a child, you don't understand that.
So here's the thing, right? So I was watching this, talking about this trauma versus thing. I was watching this whole Gen X, Gen X always talking about how tough they're. Yeah, you had the highest runaway rate of any group. And I had to stop myself from writing a comment going, yes, where when presented with the same things, millennials and Gen Z self-exit instead. So yeah, we ran away because we thought we might be able to have a good chance fighting for ourselves out there as opposed to dealing with the shit.
Yeah, I think it's pretty telling too. The other Gen X stereotype that all Gen X males, or like huge percentage of Gen X males, either joined the military, went to prison, or ended up with substance abuse issues.
Yeah, or wound working in some weird fucking thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think honestly that could probably be tacked up there with also like the military. You went into some extreme career to get out. It's but anyways, we're not. My point was trauma, insanity.
Trauma fuels behavior, right? So sanity is nice, but it doesn't take trauma into consideration. And that is the problem with the sanity system. It doesn't really cover trauma. So I think between the sanity system and the stress system I was talking about that guy created for Gore, for the hack of BRP, you can find a system where if you don't need to worry about the sanity, the stress can give you traumatic events, holdover things, right? Like I'm telling you right now, hey, Nerds Nerd, hey. I'm telling you right now, you could drop a spitting cobra in my lap and I will freeze and I'll be like, all right, that's a cobra. Let's hope he fucks off because I'm not fast enough to catch him. Let's see what he does. You put a fucking garden spider on my hand and I will lose my shit like a fucking Japanese schoolgirl facing a slime monster,
Under Call of Cthulhu rules, you already have a phobia. You already have an insanity.
Yeah.
I think the perfect blend, actually, honestly, would be a stress counter. That once you hit that stress break, you then run the chance of developing sanity issues if your trauma is not resolved correctly. That's a pretty robust system and probably too big for most role-playing games, but it could work. And you could simplify that. I think we both agree that the sanity system for Call of Cthulhu works for what it does. And as a generic system, sort of like armor class in D&D, it's not the most accurate interpretation of armor, but it works and it keeps things going. I do find the temporary bouts of insanity hard to work into Call of Cthulhu sometimes, because it really can derail the game. It's because then you have just one player fucking off for the next 3 or 4, next hour because he's crippled in fear or all right.
Is this the first time Nerd's been on your show?
I don't believe so. I think she's been on before.
I've snuck in for a few minutes before.
Yeah, usually right before I end the stream, which is about 15 minutes from me ending the stream. So I might run it a little.
Yeah, it's kind of my signature move.
I might run it a little longer because the conversation is going well, and also, I have a therapy session today at noon, but I also don't have shit to talk to my therapist about. It's been a good week. So
I guess that's good news, if any.
Yeah, well, it's 2 weeks in a row. I'm like, things are going smooth around here. So, what the hell am I supposed to talk about? It usually ends up just being a BS session with somebody who's in a neutral party at that point.
Convince them to try role-playing games. That's what you should do in your session.
Oh, she already does.
Okay. Here's a new therapy tool for you, Doc.
No. So, IQ, as somebody relatively new to gaming, have you developed a sweet spot yet as far as like your where your sweet spot for games is?
I will say this until the cows come home. I'm not a fan of the whole loot goblin or loot gremlin thing. It's not really what
Murder Hobo.
Murder Hobo, yeah. I very much prefer the story and the atmosphere that's built up during games, and that's what keeps me wanting to come back. So Call of Cthulhu is basically perfect for me.
Yeah. It looks like we lost a few viewers. I'm like, they must not have liked the discussion of trauma and sanity.
Oh no, I think one was me switching from YouTube to this.
Oh,
But I can put it back on.
No, you're fine. I'm not. I don't hoard viewers. I don't care. I mean, you know my channel. I'm barely in it. Like,
Oh, don't be silly.
no, seriously. I mean, it's,
But
Sunday
yeah,
streams is about all I do.
my sweet spot. I like the fact that the mechanics are simple enough, but also involved enough that if you say something, there will probably be a roll that you can make if the GM allows it. But it's not so complex that you have to go into so much detail about every specific thing you're doing.
I'm glad you kind of learned that already, because this is something that even like a lot of old hat, gamers still don't realize, is that I think the best way to game, to run RPGs and to play RPGs, is to express what your character does by expressing what they do and not think about it in terms of roles. I mean, ideally, it should be I say what I'm doing, and then the GM tells me if I need a role at all. There's this using Call of Cthulhu as an example. There's this style of play where anytime somebody's trying to find a clue or suss out some information from an NPC or whatever, that make a roll, make a psychology check. No, I mean, sometimes things are just obvious. Like if you give me a detailed description of searching the apartment, and there's a clue there, I don't feel the need to have you roll. You've already told me you're taking time, so I can take that into account as GM that you spent time there. And so as long as the clue is not hidden in such a way that it requires a specific check, I won't require any kind of a roll, or I shouldn't. I mean, sometimes just there's a reflex there too. But even like things like psychology rolls, or the NPC's talking to you, you're like, I want to see if he's telling the truth.
Yeah.
I can make a judgment call as a GM and say, this guy is not a professional liar. He's clearly hiding something.
Yeah.
Or maybe the way I role play him makes it obvious. Like if I'm playing him going with like, then clearly, there's something up.
Yeah. You don't need a psychology roll to know that this guy's exhibiting shifty behavior.
Go ahead, Nerds Nerd.
Yeah, it's interesting. The opposite side of it, like we've pretty much well accepted kind of universally that there's some things you don't get to roll for. Like there's no chance of it succeeding. Yep. You don't get to roll. Don't even try. But the opposite of it doesn't seem to be as common, where it's like, of course you would be able to succeed. Why would you need a roll?
Yeah, I think that's a gaming philosophy, and that's kind of a newer thing too, where this idea that anything is possible no matter what, I just have to make a roll for it. Is that what you're talking about, Nerds Nerd?
Yeah, I mean, you see it a lot with the D&D crowd, where every game master and most of the players get to that point where they realize letting someone succeed on a 20, no matter what it is insane, because you don't have a 5% chance of doing some impossible thing. So by and large, we've come to accept that it's good to tell players, no, you do not get to roll for this because you cannot succeed.
This is why I like Call of Cthulhu for two reasons. So one, if you pass a roll, like let's say you're looking for hidden items and you pass a spot hidden roll, you then have found everything possible with that one roll. You then don't have to say, well, I want to look deeper and find something else and then do another spot hidden. It's all covered in the first roll. Secondly, you can redefine failure and success in Call of Cthulhu as success could be failure could be success at a cost, for example.
Yeah, you can push
or success could be forward. The least bad version of failure. So, if, for example, if you want to go up to the High King and try and convince him to give up his throne to you, a 100% success could just be he laughs at you and doesn't take you seriously rather than putting you in prison.
Yeah, well, it's also, I mean, I will argue this, and my players are always it's come to a point where my 5e players troll me for it, because the 20 letting you do anything in D&D especially comes from this ignorance of or misconception that the natural 20 critical applies to skill checks, which it doesn't. It's in the rules that it doesn't, but people are like, oh, it should. I'm like, well, except for then you get stupid shit like I jumped to the moon because I rolled a 20 on my athletics check. No, you didn't. And like you're talking about with trying to convince the king to give you his army, it's like, or give his throne. There's no way in hell that's happening, no matter how good you roll on your
exactly. So a critical success wouldn't be he gives up his throne. It would be he doesn't put you in jail.
No, exactly. The critical success is the king doesn't have you beheaded for being a fucking awesome.
Yeah. You roll the 20. The king looks at you and says, "Get thee from my presence, you."
Or best case scenario, he says, "You know what? You're funny. You're my new jester.
Give this man a floppy hat.
Attach bells to this knave immediately."
And then compounding that issue, right? You'll have 4 to 6 players, and they'll all make the same roll to accomplish the same thing. And all of that sudden, that 1 in 20 is now 6 chances of 1 in 20, and all kinds of crazy things happen all the time.
Yes, I shut that shit down in my games. I got tired of the skill dog piles. I'm like, all right, so all 4 of you are going to try this. One person, whoever's got the highest bonus, rolls at advantage. One roll collectively for all of you. Because I'm not sitting here doing this. Oh, I'm also going to check. So let me get this straight. The party is interested in finding a secret door, but you all just sat back on your hands and let one guy do it. I'm like, if that's, it's different if like, they're like, okay, well, they're going to let the thief go do it, and we're going to stand back with our bows ready. That's different. And then if they want to do a subsequent check, maybe, but we've all had it where like one's like, I'm going to search for secret doors. Oh yeah, I'm also going to search.
Dirty history hobbies. I hope my legs don't break walking on the moon. There we go. Sorry, we're having a little police moment. You guys can continue. We're just talking about the greatest band that ever lived. Anyway, no, but I agree. And I think this is one of the things. I think the perfect meme of that is the druid that turns into the tree. And then the 2 orc guards are like, have you ever seen this tree in the field before? But he rolls a bluff and the tree says, I've always been here, and gets a natural 20. Well, the tree would know best. Like this.
That meme that was in the Discord.
Fucking absurdity. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That actually reminds me of some Cold War stories I've heard. A buddy of mine was stationed in East Germany and or West, on the border of East Germany, I should say. And he would say, he'd sit there from his position, and there'd be a shack out there. And the next day, that shack was 10 feet to the left. And then the next day, the shack would be 30 feet down the way. And they would just move the shack to fuck with the position. Or in World War I, where they made whole artificial trees to like put observers out in no man's land. They just make a tree and walk out there with it.
I'm Canadian. I'm not allowed to talk about World War I because of the amount of war crimes we did in that war.
You're the reason the Geneva Convention exists, dude.
We're pretty bad. Like, I was reading a list of them recently, and I was like, oh, God. Oh, my God. Like, I got to one where I was just like, no, that's just wrong.
I remember you describing Canada as, oh, we're fighting now. Okay, then.
Some might argue that's the reason Canadians are nice. Yeah. Canadians are kind of the Bruce Banner of countries. You wouldn't want to see me when I'm angry.
Absolutely. We're perfectly nice until it's like, oh, it's a fight then. All right. Let's go.
Don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
Well, like the
entire country of Canada walking down the street to slow piano music. Do, 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 do.
Do you know why baseball bats are not allowed as sidearms in the military in the Geneva Conventions? How's it going, eh? It's in World War II, World War I. Canadians would take baseball bats, drive spikes through them, and then go into the enemy trenches and club anyone, wounded, injured, or alive, that they ran into.
Also, you guys invented the nail bat.
Yes, it's a Canadian thing.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure it was the Americans that decided to bring shotguns into the trenches.
Oh, yeah.
the trench gun, which is illegal also. The shotgun with a bayonet fixed onto it.
But there's the perfect thing, going back to talking about the sanity and all that kind of stuff. One of the things, a buddy of mine, when we played Call of Cthulhu back in college, he had a character who was had just come out of the Great War, and he was a Russian violinist who had been recruited, obviously, for the Great War, and was an artilleryman. And so he was deaf in one ear, and that was his whole thing, that he was deaf in one ear. And he drove our keeper crazy. Every time he'd tell us, you hear a noise, he'd be like, which side? What do you mean? Well, is it on the left or the right? Well, it's on the left. Well, then I don't hear it.
Well,
So
at least
I
you're
don't
honestly playing the character.
Yeah, but he just used it as like I don't have to make that sanity check. Fuck you. That's where I said, you know what? The best character in this game is the deaf blind guy who can't read or taste. That's the best character.
Yeah,
because they'll never go insane.
The sanity checks, of course, require an intelligence check to see if you even get the immensity of what you saw. You know,
Yeah.
a dumb character can blither through Call of Cthulhu like, what was that?
I like going to Dunwich. They got good fish sandwiches there.
That there looks like a monster. I think I saw it in my Superman comic.
Why
Yeah,
is he
character
Hank
with
Hill?
high sanity
Why
and
did
low
you turn him
intelligence.
into Hank Hill? That's take care of that Yog Sahar with some propane.
I'll tell you what,
I'll tell you what, sister, get my keys.
Lovecraft and Lovecraftian accessories. The next curio shop owner in my Call of Cthulhu game.
But does that mean you have to make a
Text
sanity
to-
check every time fucking Boomhauer talks to you because you don't know what the fuck he's saying? I don't want
He's speaking Ogsothian. You know,
He's speaking Eldritch.
no, Cthulhu Mathogan.
You son of a bitch.
Dale Gribble's actually right.
Dale's the guy who's read all the lore.
Tell you, Hank, it's Yog Sothoth.
It's the goat of the woods with 1,000 young.
Does that mean that Bill is immune to most sanity checks because he's just an idiot? Now I want to run that campaign.
Isn't it?
East
You
Texas
lose sanity,
fucking,
and then you lose more sanity if you understand it.
Yeah, if you understand it,
Yeah,
you lose more
yeah.
sanity. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so you have to pass an intelligence check to go and say be hit by in the insanity.
Yeah.
Wait, no,
Which-
don't you have to fail the intelligence check? Because if you pass it, you understand.
No, it's the other way around. Low intelligence makes it harder to pass, and passing is what. See if maybe I can get myself turned around. Basically, the dumb guy has a lower chance of getting it, of understanding it. So yeah, you have to pass the
Yeah,
intelligence.
so if you have a higher intelligence stat, you're more likely to pass the roll, which means you're more likely to understand it.
Yes, and understanding is what causes the insanity.
Yeah, and you need to fail the roll. So you need to roll higher than your intelligence.
My God, man, look at them. Look at them. They're some sort of fish people. Look at them. You can see the gills in the neck. You can see the color in the skin. They've got some sort of fish thing going on. I don't know. They just look kind of like my cousin Angus. You understand? Like, that's the level we're talking about. Like, that's exactly what we're talking about, is that level.
That was weird. My wife just tried to Facebook call me.
Interesting.
No, but I got to make sure she's out working in the public in public, so she may need help. No, she probably just butt dialed me. No, so yeah, it's passing. So passing the intelligence test is what makes you take the sanity hit.
Yeah.
Failing-
So if your character has
Failing.
20 intelligence and they need to roll above it to fail it, which means they're more likely to fail it, right?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. The dumb character is the one who's less likely to get hit with the insanity, with the sanity hit.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing, but from the other side.
Yeah, you're fine.
But I like that about Call of Cthulhu because it makes sense that some of the abominations that you see, you wouldn't be able to comprehend. You just see them and think, "Oh, fuck that, I'm out."
Yeah, it's the biggest. So the problem, one of the problems with the sanity too, is in the, and this is becoming the entire Call of Cthulhu sanity stream. But
That's my fault. Sorry.
no, it's not actually. The modules, the published adventures, do not treat sanity consistently. And some of them, which were written as convention scenarios, are much more harsh with the sanity because they need to get the effect in and done within the scope of a convention game. So they're more punishing.
Is it because they're written as a one-shot?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So, but also there are weird inconsistencies in some of the modules. Seth Grukowski did a coverage of one. I can't remember the particular adventure, but it always stands out really in my head because it was actually an absolute eye roll. The scenario includes a sanity check for noticing your reflection in the mirror in a dark bathroom. It includes a sanity check for dropping a straight razor, which every man alive in the 20s has probably done, and probably a good number of women in the 20s, because straight razors are just a way of life, right? Even though safety razors, I think, had existed at that point, people were still using straight razors. But that same adventure, when it culminates at the end of the game, and like the big bad shows up, the module doesn't actually call for a sanity check.
What? That's dumb.
It's probably something that they skipped in the rules, or they just assumed that because the stats for the thing say that there's a sanity hit, but they didn't publish it in the module. So some of the modules are written poorly to begin with. Like I said, there's no and this goes back to what is actually a sanity hit and what's just frightening you and where stress would come through. I think you could make a legitimate claim for if you walked into a dark room while you're doing an investigation and there's something spooky going on and you caught the reflection of yourself in a mirror in a dark room, you might take a stress hit because for that brief second, you're like, is there somebody else in here with me? It's not going to shatter your mind.
Yeah.
Dropping a straight razor may be scary and you might cut yourself, but I don't even think that would be a stress hit because that's literally like, I mean, it's not like the razor fell and like stuck into your toe. At that point, you're just doing the Jim Carrey. But yeah, but that's just a poorly written module.
Yeah, who hasn't dropped a knife at some point in their life? Like that's a crazy thing to have to roll sanity for.
I did it this morning while making breakfast.
Yeah, the first thing I do is step backwards.
There's a reason I don't let my dogs be in the kitchen when I'm cooking.
To the floor point first. I'm like, God, that wasn't sanity. I didn't like then go, and
yeah,
covering my cats as hats. I just kind of went, oh, fuck, that almost took my foot off. Good thing it didn't.
I don't know. Maybe someone wakes up on the wrong side of the bed. They're like, I can't even hold a knife properly.
Yes, Cthulhu modules are mostly shit. Let's just be honest. I think most, like Eli said, most of them are written as a one-off. So as a result, you don't really get to. They kind of maximize the sanity effect in those one-offs. The original box set, though, had a multiple-part adventure, which was really nice. Except in the final adventure, Cthulhu awakens, and you immediately take D100 sanity. Right there.
Yeah.
So you just spent 4 or 3 or 5 adventures, whatever it was, doing what you did, and now we're all fucking crazy. Isn't that fun?
Yeah, the campaigns or the longer adventures, which I guess is a campaign. It doesn't have to be a giant, it'll take you years to play Horror on the Orient Express, campaign. They tend to parse the sanity out in a more realistic way because the expectation is that you're going to stay in the game. And they're not playing for effect, which is what a convention one-shot is doing. It's playing for effect. It's trying to get all the beats of the game in there as quickly and as tangibly as it can. I mean, let's face it, if a Call of Cthulhu convention game was played like regular ongoing campaigns for Call of Cthulhu, you'd probably sit around there and going, well, that was a lovely Call of Cthulhu game, but we really didn't get anything done because those mystery games tend to draw out a little bit. I mean, for example, IQ, in you're playing in Horror in the Orient Express with Yogg, right? How many sanity hits have you taken as a character in your entire time running that game? Playing that game?
It depends because my current character has double the sanity that my first character started with, and he took quite a few hits. but my current one's actually doing all right because he's got more to start with, so he's more likely to pass the roll.
But how often have you been called upon to take the sanity check?
Oh, I'd say at least once a session. It's not too much, but it's not too little either. It
once
depends
a
on what's
session,
going
though,
on.
once a session is actually pretty low.
Well, no. So there was one session where we were in some caves, and I think we rolled 4 or 5 in the space of like 2 hours.
Yeah,
There was
it's
so much shit going on in there that
that's how a campaign's going to flex. Because I mean, face it, while you're doing the investigation in the city and going to libraries and studying tomes and dealing with cultists, probably not a lot of calls for sanity checks. But when you get into the dark, spooky caves full of ghouls or the dead or whatever, sure, then you're probably a little bit more prone to have sanity checks. My party was my players were doing really good on sanity for a while until a guy walked up the steps of the museum, convulsed, and then had a whole ass human being emerge from a flesh portal in the guy's chest and stab at him with a knife.
yeah, that's pretty sanity loss inducing.
Exactly. So like everybody took a sanity hit. Then the guy got stabbed to within 2 hit points of his life and hospitalized for the next session. And then they had a shadow, some sort of shadow thing come after the guy while he was in the hospital, and they do an escape scene with him still on 2 hit points.
And then he had a dream about a dog chasing him. Fuck, bad day.
But the point is like they can go a long time without sanity checks, and
So we've done about 30 sessions in the ballpark, maybe between 25 and 30. And I'd say we've done about that many sanity checks, maybe like 40 to 50 maximum.
I think it's fair to call one per session. I would also ask, though, like, what are causing the sanity checks? The sanity checks are probably things that warrant the sanity check, right?
Yeah, we're not losing sanity for every time we see a dead body, because eventually you're going to get used to it. So there's no point rolling for sanity.
You're walking down the train car and you accidentally spill your champagne. Oh no, roll sanity.
Oh no, not on the French train.
Oh.
If you have the alcohol.
Is this late millennial generation Z Call of Cthulhu we're playing now? You went into the store.
Oh no,
And he misgendered you. Sanity check. That's the one I want to play. I want to see the modern Call of Cthulhu.
I would say
that would be
more of
nail.
a trauma thing than a sanity thing, but
no, I would say like the store was out of the nail polish color you use. Sanity check.
The heel on your high heel broke.
Yeah, but let's flip it around. Somebody asked you to wear a mask. Sanity check.
Sanity check. Oh no, dude, it's not attacking one side over the other. I'm talking about the very fucking sensitive, oversensitive everyone today.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, here's an idea. If you were handed a mask and you were like, let me look at this for a second.
Okay.
What was that?
You find out the mask is made of human skin.
Now
that
sanity
would make
check.
you lose sanity.
Now fucking sanity check.
Yeah. I mean,
there has to be a justification for it.
The rebreather that they give you to go underwater is actually some bioengineered set of gill lungs creature thing.
And you have to wear this sanity check.
And it has to put a tube down your throat,
Yeah, what happens when you're trying to escape the Migos underwater base, and all their weird biotech. But at the same time, I've seen in scenarios, there's a cat scare, roll sanity. A cat jump scare. Roll sanity. No, I've done. We've all been there. You're like, fucking cat.
Yeah, that's the response every time.
I've seen enough horror films in my life now that if the cat scares me, I'm immediately ready for what's coming. I'm like, okay, if the cat scared me, I'm gonna go, oh, fucking cat, and then get attacked. So now
you turn around and look behind you because there's something coming.
Yeah, exactly.
For the actual attack.
Fuck that noise. But I'm also the kind of crazy person that when I hear something weird happening and I decide in my brain it's a ghost, I say things like, look, just do what you want to do or fuck off, but I got to sleep. Like that's where I've gotten to in life now, where I don't care.
I think everyone negotiates with the scaries, right? You find a spider in the shower, you start talking to him, you make a deal. You stay in your corner, I'll stay over here. Same thing with ghosts. It makes perfect sense.
I find a spider in the shower. It's like, welcome to the flood of God while you head for the drain, fuckstick.
I used to be very forgiving.
Yes, you kill him, but you talk him down first. Lower his guard, tell him there's a truce, and then you blast him.
I used to be very forgiving of spiders when I lived in a state that didn't have dangerous ones. Now that I live in a state where we have dangerous spiders, I'm a little less negotiating. little less.
You guys have widows and recluses there, right?
No, just recluses, no widows.
Okay. But
But
dude, Pacific Northwest, we had wolf spiders. Those fucking things are aggressive and they hiss.
yeah, but they don't hurt
What?
you.
Ugh.
Wolf spiders, I've dealt with enough wolf. So back when my kids were growing up in Washington, I had this policy of capturing every spider in the house and making sure that I would educate the kids in the markings and stuff like that, so they knew what. And we'd catch like the Goliath house spiders that are that they're up there, and I'm like, all right, just stay in your corner, dude. And we would let them sit in our house, and you know what we didn't have in our house? Flies, gnats, any other insect, But at the same time, the one time that I found a fiddleback, I'm like, all right, kids, see this? If you ever see this, no bueno, no. And that spider didn't get escorted out of the house. That spider got terminated.
Sorry, I have to make a sanity check. Hang on.
I know you don't like spiders.
I hate fucking spiders. Stop talking about them. Fuck.
So how about scorpions?
Okay, cool. Scorpions are neat.
Yeah, scorpions are cool.
But no,
It's funny how that works because, like, I have the same thing with wasps. I have a vespophobia, so a wasp will freak me out. I get nauseous. I start dry heaving. But a bumblebee or a honeybee is perfectly fine, even though it's basically the same thing.
yeah, but there's a certain amount of profiling there that goes with it. I mean, there's a legitimate fear of a wasp.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and say bees are like Muslims and wasps are like terrorists.
I was watching.
Might look the same, but they're not. Trust me.
It's nuts. I was actually watching a thing on wasp evolution the other day, and the whole sting aspect comes from wasps' earliest thing, which was this parasitoid reproduction.
Yep.
The whole reason that wasps and bees can sting is because they had basically the alien reproduction is their earliest evolutionary trait. Wasps just came out being assholes. So you have a legitimate reason to fear them. They decided they had to evolve into nicer forms of themselves.
What's that?
And
Is it
nothing
the
causes a sanity
Japanese
check
giant
more.
hornet?
Yeah, the murder hornet. Nothing causes sanity checks more than looking into insects. There's just a part of your brain that just starts to go, why does this exist? Why did nature create this? Why? How does the world that creates
God is
puppies
real and
also
he
create
hates us.
that? What?
No, it's just insects decided that they were gonna overachieve in every evolutionary niche that they could. It's like they're like, we will form every. I was reading about the other day about there's one species of ant that practices slavery.
Oh, I've heard this.
They go out to
I've
steal
heard
ants
that.
from other colonies and bring them home and make them work for them.
Yeah.
So they can sit back and be lazy ass ants. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah,
Yeah, they've learned from watching us.
My grandmother was a bee whisperer. It was the creepiest thing we ever saw. Like, bees would land on her while she was gardening, and she would talk to them and pet them, and they were totally kosher with it. And she explained to us, she's like, look, to get a bee to sting you, you really have to piss the bee off. Like, they want to get away from you. They want to be left alone because it's death for them to attack you in that way. So just leave them the fuck alone. And then we learned about the hornets. Hornets. You don't like wasps, darling? You don't like wasps? So let me introduce you to the fucking hornet, their brown, shittier, meaner cousin. Oh my
Hornet
god.
is a wasp, though. That's
Yeah, but it's a hornet is a specific type of wasp.
yeah.
It's
Hornets are like, you walked near me. Now all of us must kill
fuck
you.
you and all my friends with me.
Yeah, when my brother was about 5, he was tooling around in the underbrush and he ran through, put a foot down into a hornet nest.
Oh,
And he goes running across the yard at this party. It was like a big adult party, and us kids were there. And he's running along across the yard, flailing his hands, screeching. And all the parents are like, "Aha! Look at the silly kid!" And I just look at him and I yell, "Bees!" And I go charging and tackle my brother. But in that short period of time, I tackled him on the ground and start pulling his clothes off him because they had got down his shirt, down his pants, everywhere. This poor little 5-year-old had been stung like 13 times in the brief time that it took me to go over and tackle him. Fortunately, he's not allergic.
My sister Madeline, we were apple picking when we were about 10. She stepped in a hornet's nest. She got stung 800 times. In the hospital, she looked like the fucking Michelin Man. She was swollen up so bad. And now she has the anaphylactic thing where if she gets stung by any insect, she has 30 seconds or whatever it is to inject herself with the auto injector or bye-bye.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
As far as I understand it, you can grow into that allergy too because the bee protein never really leaves your system and it builds up. And that's the sucky part.
It's fucked up. But this is the horror of the universe. So if you're ever looking for stuff to do in your Call of Cthulhu games that are going to fuck with your players' heads, investigate the wild world of insects and you'll find plenty of material, man.
Oh, yeah.
Plenty of material.
It's nuts. Just or animals in general.
Imagine you're in the shop to get some fucking thing you need for the quest you're on, and there's that weird guy in the trench coat walking around with the hat, and then when he stops and he tips his hat to say good day, there's a sprout coming out of the top of his head. Like that fucking weird fungus that takes control of
cordyceps,
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
cordyceps,
that would fuck you up.
As much as Lovecraft likes to blend fungal things into his stuff, that would make perfect sense, actually. But it's funny. I on the topic of Call of Cthulhu scenarios and stuff like that, a lot of people lean into the creepy, weird tentacle horror. The ones that get kind of ignored, although the modules do work with them, are the weird alien sci-fi elements that are in Lovecraft stuff too, like the Migo and the Yithians, the Great Race of Yith. Because the Great Race of Yith is creepy as fuck, because basically they teleport themselves back through time and occupy bodies. And so, like, your friend that you've known every day could suddenly stop being your friend. Why? Because a Yithian is now occupying him, and his mind is in the future in a Yithian's body.
Yeah.
And the Yithians are interviewing him, getting all they can while he's interacting on the world. There's actually a cool Call of Cthulhu module where there's a young boy who's in an insane asylum who is confined to a wheelchair, and he only moves his hands in crab claw fashion and communicates in kind of gibberish. It's because he's got a Yithian in him and hasn't evolved, and the Yithian hasn't figured out how to use his body yet, so it can't use legs because Yithians have that kind of slug walk where they undulate their lower body. And so he's confined to a wheelchair, and he can only move his fingers in crab pincher movements. And because the Yithians communicate by clacking their fingers together, their claws together, he's trying to talk, but they just think he's this poor kid who's got some sort of madness. And then there's the Migo who will pull your brain.
That Yithian got the shitty fucking discount trip, didn't he? It's like, I'm going to save $1 on this trip to the past. Ah, fuck, I wound up in this body? Motherfuckers.
Well, and it's the funny thing. Well, so evidently the issue in that case is the Yithian probably would have had a fair chime of it, except for the kid's parents institutionalized him before the Yithian could figure it out. And so all the treatment that the kid's getting, treatment by 1920 standards, is interfering with the Yithian's ability to integrate into the body.
Nice.
And so he can't figure it out. Meanwhile, you have the Migo, who are like the techno terrorist aliens. And I've used actually Migo devices a couple of times in my games. But the Migo, like, they'll pull your brain out and put it in a jar and then take you to whatever freaking their planet is. They're out on Pluto, which has a different name in Lovecraft's universe, but because they haven't quite discovered Pluto yet. But
do you remember the Dreamlands box set?
Now, Dreamlands is cool because if you want to run fantasy adventure stuff and keep it in your Call of Cthulhu game, you go to the Dreamlands.
You could do an absolute sword and sorcery campaign in the Dreamlands.
Oh, that's what it's designed for. That was Lovecraft stretching his sword and sorcery legs.
Yeah,
The cool thing is the two worlds meet. The two worlds meet, and there's different ways to get to the Dreamlands. You can either get there through your dreams, or you can find that the silver staircase, or you can go to the plateau of Leng and cross over. So there's all these different ways. It's really cool. But yeah, like
that'd be a fun fucking campaign, man. That'd be like a warlord, like from DC, like Travis Morgan warlord, someone like that, winding up in the lands of Dreamlands, and That'd be fucking badass.
I think the main Dreamland story that Lovecraft wrote kind of read like that. It's a guy from the real world who ends up in the
Dream Quest of the Unknown Cadet.
Yeah, and where he ends up having to run through and gets help from the ghouls to escape the Dreamlands.
Yeah, he goes to the city of cats and stuff like that. It's
And he
really
ends up
weird.
in the ghouls' catacombs, and they basically help him up through the ground until he comes out of a grave in some random graveyard somewhere. Because that's the other thing, is the ghouls are actually tied into the Dreamlands, and they're catacombs. While they're physical places in the real world, if you go deep enough into them, they transition into the Dreamlands. So it's super cool. But yeah, the Migo, like in one of the adventures I wrote and ran for my group, there I played off of the old kind of quack science, kind of wonders of technology thing that was happening in the 20s. It's what Wonders and makes a great time. It's also where a lot of Lovecraft's stories come from. His whole cold air story is basically his fear of air conditioning.
Wait, seriously?
Cold air. Okay. He writes Cold Air the year air conditioning comes out. Lovecraft was just a ball of nerves who was afraid of everything. He hated fish, and like the fishiness and all of that stuff creeped him out. So why do you think all of he was terrified of the ocean? It all plays into his psychology. But it was in this scenario, there's this cylinder that's being advertised, in the papers. Got nerves, your wife have chronic hysteria issues, spend 1 hour a day in the presence of this little white noise generating silver cylinder and you'll be fine. And the truth of it was the cylinder is literally removing thoughts from people's brains and collecting them for the Migo. And they've managed to tap into some inventor who didn't actually invent this, but they've managed to co-opt his eagerness and his production to like get these things out into the public. And slowly but surely through the investigation, they find out that, these scientists who had the early experiments with this, oh yeah, it's wonderful. Ever since this time, my thoughts have been much more streamlined and with less troubled and blah, blah, blah. And then like a month later, they're gibbering idiots because just so many of their thoughts have been removed by the Migo. They're not pulling the whole brain. They're just pulling thoughts. And that's how you use the Migo.
This is the thing about Call of Cthulhu, right? The best adventures are going to be the ones where you're fighting cultists or Migo or whatever, but not actual elder fucking beings.
It should always be their it should not always, but usually be their minions. Even if it's not the elder guys, some of the monsters are so powerful, like the Chthonians, the big worms under the sea.
Yeah, I know what you mean because I got the Keeper's book now.
The Chthonians will kill a party.
Yep.
So here's the new dog. This is Rocco.
Oh, there we are.
He came
We
down.
all decided Call of Cthulhu is awesome in some weird way.
What was that?
I said, there we are. We've all decided Call of Cthulhu is awesome in some weird way.
Yeah, and on that note, I'm probably going to have to bring things to a close because I have about 30 minutes till I got to go do my thing. But it's been a good chat. I'm thankful that everybody came on and happy to have you here. Nerd's Nerd, you were quiet, but you did weigh in some substantial ways. I appreciate that. But yeah, it's as much as I talk about Call of Cthulhu, I sure as hell wish I could run it more than I do. I just have a hard time finding slots to run to play / run games. I have things that I have to do. Like I have a job and I have a relationship with my wife that I actually like to maintain.
No one likes a braggart. No one likes a braggart. Sir.
But no, looks like I'm still going to have Mondays free. So my plans for opening and creating a Monday during the day game slot is probably still going to go forward. I don't know what I'm going to be running. It's not going to be D&D though, because I'm still doing too much D&D. But yeah. All right. So to everybody,
I should do a Call of Cthulhu game at this point.
I would like to. I've been.
If you do, I'll be interested.
I'm tempted to try to kind of play around, stretch my wings a bit more on modern Call of Cthulhu. I've run a couple of modern scenarios because for the longest time it really didn't appeal to me. But I do like the idea of not having to define the world so often when I'm running modern Call of Cthulhu, because everybody just knows what the world is like.
Yeah, you don't need to establish things as much because it's what's happening now, basically.
You also don't find yourself doing a lot of corrections. Like when your players in the 1920s Call of Cthulhu are like, and I'm going to do such and such. I'm like, no, you're not.
Yep.
I'm going to call such and such. Okay,
No, you're not.
place the call, and then you're going to wait an hour for the operator to get back. I have your line connected, sir. Or there's no phone there. But then the trade off is you have to figure out how to work with all that technology.
Yeah.
And there's been some good advice on that. One of the best ones that I heard was that there is every bit of technology that your players have access to them. So do the bad guys. The cultists are going to have websites. They're going to have hackers. They're going to have smartphones. They're going to have surveillance. The great old ones are probably going to have found ways to interact with technology. There's one published adventure that has a Dark Young that's wired into a server farm,
Oh, hang on.
and it can cast spells over the internet.
I think I know which one you mean, but I can't recall the name.
There's one point in the story where you try to make a phone call, and a swarm of black flies comes out of your cell phone. Because the Dark Young is in there casting magic, working magic through the technology.
Does dark magic use TCP or UDP to cast the spells?
It uses its own language.
I think dark magic would clearly be a Linux-based system no matter what.
DOS. It's just DOS. It's the old tongue.
Wow.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for showing up. Both all of the folks that were on the panel and the folks that showed up in the comments. Always great to see you. I am going to go have the rest of my Sunday. And Bear, thank you for coming on today, especially you. Special thanks to you, because prior to the stream, I was talking through some stuff with Bear. And after this stream, I'm feeling a lot better than I was about the channel and about what I've been doing. So I think maybe the key is just to turn my Sunday streams into more panel-based things, because it was really grating on me trying to figure out ways to make these streams worth doing on my own. So I appreciate that. And have a good one, everybody. Get out and game. And yes, Coco, you missed it, but we'll see you tomorrow for By the Sword. And Barry, you're still doing stuff online, right? Your channel live?
Not this month, but next month, yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not playing games, but you're still like posting videos and stuff to your channel, right?
Just doing live streams. This is a reading month for me.
That's fine. All good. IQ, you have a channel too. I know you're still streaming the video games.
I do. I'm going to be streaming in about half an hour-ish.
I have a suggestion for you, IQ.
Go ahead.
Take this for what it is, whatever you want. As a new gamer, somebody who's really just getting into it, you should start posting your thoughts and stuff on your experience getting into the hobby, because you have a really interesting perspective. You are a young guy who's coming up playing with the older dudes for the most part, and so that's a great meeting point. You're not.
That's what you should call the videos, playing with older dudes. You'll get a lot of traffic just based on that name.
That is true. There you go.
No. I've seen Lemon Party. This ain't happening, okay?
But no, seriously, I think you do have a unique perspective, and you are a well-spoken individual, and you're
I tried to be. Thank you.
And I think that a segment on your channel. First of all, you probably pull in some other viewers besides the video game crowd, and there's a good amount of crossover. And you never know, you might be bringing some more folks like you into the hobby, who maybe don't get into the hobby because they're young folks and they hear about what all the young folks are like nowadays. All the young folks. I say that with big air quotes because you know me, I'm not a huge generationalist.
No, you don't. Yeah.
Yeah, but I believe that the internet espouses a certain perception that all the young gamers are are like this, and I think there's nuance and subtlety there that you can
Be a leader, Iman. Do it.
Exactly. And before I find something else to talk about, I'm just going to say goodbye again. Have a good one, folks.
Thanks for having me.
Later.